All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Gun 7. I'm your host, Ifrah Udgon. Today's a gloomy kind of Sunday. It's dark and thunderous out there here in Columbus. I don't know how it is in Washington State, which is apt to be rainy, I heard. But we have the wonderful Faduma Bulale with us today. I'm really excited to speak with you, Faduma, about, special education. That's my alley. That's my favorite topic of all time. I'm really happy that you're here. Welcome.
Thank you, Farah. Good afternoon, everyone. For us, it's just right afternoon, 12:01 here. So just afternoon. It's quite dark and gloomy, but it's nothing bad. We're used to it here in Seattle, Washington. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited. Those are my passion projects as well. Education, special education, our children. Those are all great things that I'm interested in.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Our children and their education, right? Is there anything that is more important? I can't
Nothing.
imagine. I can't imagine. Faduma, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be so wonderful so that we can get to know you as well.
Faduma. My name is Faduma Bulale. I live specifically in Renton, Washington, which is a suburb of in Seattle, by Seattle, Washington, the bigger city. Been living here for the last 25 plus years since we came to America. I have 3 children. I am married. I have lots of siblings. My whole family lives here locally, well, except for my 2 sisters who are now Canadians by marriage. I have 3 children, like I said before, an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And my passion is education. My passion started when we were going to education, when we were going to school here as first newcomers, as preteens and teenagers navigating the education system here in Washington and in America in general, and just struggling. We came, third culture kids. We've always been diaspora people. We were born in the Middle East and then stayed in Somalia and then Uganda after the war and here. And English wasn't, we weren't necessarily ELL students, so we spoke English. But the cultural, process was quite a quagmire. It was difficult to navigate. There was racism and, people biases, stigma, all those things we were dealing with. And those were the obstacles that we faced. And then I was like, oh, it's been 20 years and now I'm educated. It will be so much easier for my children. No way. It was almost just as bad. All the same things were still here. The system was still rigged against us. So when it was my children's turn, I was like, can't sit back and let the system hold back my children. And as I was advocating for my children, I was like, can't just become an advocate for my children. My children will not succeed if they're the only ones succeeding. So it became a matter of, Somali children and Black children and brown children. And now I'm not embarrassed to say that I specifically focus on Somali children because we have so many obstacles that face us that are specific to our community.
Wow. I'm really glad to hear, what a champion you are for young, young children, young Somali children, young Black and brown children. And absolutely, we do have to, make a focus at times so that we can be the most effective because we're human beings. There's only so much that we can do about the problems of the world, and they are aplenty. So to make sure that we're as effective as possible, having a focus really is very, very important. I hear you when you say that 20 years later, and the hope is that our children would have it differently. Our American-born children, our majority English-speaking children. I remember one time my child was placed like in an ELL class, my American-born English-speaking child. And I was just aghast. I was like, nothing wrong with ELL classes, for people who need it, right? And I'm glad that we have those services, right? But the idea that just because there's another language being spoken in the house and the idea that that is a deficit, so to speak, that takes away from the child's ability to learn English or, even though this is an American born English speaking child, it just didn't settle very well with me. So I removed him, and they called me and said, hey, why did you do that? And I said, well, he doesn't need it. I need him to be in a regular ELA class. He doesn't need English language second language services. I was just kind of matter of fact about it. But when they pressed me on it is when the back, wheels in my mind are turning. Like, why are you, if I'm telling you as a parent, this child speaks English, put him in regular ELA classes, why are you fighting me on this? Like, so I had to think about that bias.
It's the way, and at the time we had the same exact experience for my daughter in kindergarten, and that was when we talked, I was telling you about it. I remember asking my Ukrainian friend, who's also in the same boat as I, kind of same age. She came here as a teenager, and I was like, when you put the papers, was your son Stefan also, and she's like, no. And I was like, oh, so it's just some people and some languages that trigger the system that make it so that we go to ELL languages. European languages are not considered ELL. They're considered, instead of a deficit, they're considered a specialty. And when I explained that my children are multilingual, and English is one of their first languages besides, Somali, and learning Arabic now, and hopefully Spanish soon. So I'm like, how is it a deficit? And why would we place her in ELL? Nothing wrong with ELL. I advocate for ELL students and special education students. But in this case, my daughter being placed in there takes it away from a child who needs the program when it's unnecessary. And, the same thing. I got the pushback. So we have to, and that's what I'm saying. It was a paper. It was a form that triggered the thing. Not even her teacher wasn't even aware of it. I got her first trimester report card, and that's when I noticed. And the reason I fought so hard against it, besides being mislabeled and unnecessary, was because it was in the way of some of the other programming we were talking about, the highly capable program in our state, which children are, they're marked for in kindergarten, and teachers and administrators are supposed to place the children there, but unfortunately they don't do that a lot for Black children or brown children, and especially for immigrant or Muslim kids. So our children are mostly kept away from these programs, and BELL triggers it in a way that that child isn't even eligible for that program because it's a highly capable program. It doesn't necessarily, they don't take special need children, special education children, and ELL children unless someone else mentions that maybe a child with a special education program on IEP is twice exceptional child, which means that they're both special education and also highly capable at the same time. So it's just the advocacy. It feels like sometimes I'm always advocating for every single thing and fighting them for everything instead of being the system supporting us. It's almost like, give us what's our due, let our children thrive,
Right. Oh my goodness. Give us what is due and let our children thrive. Like, don't stand in their way. Don't stand in their way. And there's, plenty of that. The highly capable program is what we call on this side, then the gifted program. Okay. So the gifted program. Tell us more about that and how children are recognized and in Washington State.
So they're given a test similar to an IQ test, and it is problematic. There's so many problems associated with it, which is the part of it where the teachers have to recommend. Some districts, it's by referral. A parent, the child, the teacher, anybody can advocate, and then the child gets tested. But in some districts, for equity reasons, all children in the second grade get tested because the program starts in the third grade. So that way, nobody's left behind, because it was being found that biases, unconscious or indirect or explicit bias, either way, that the numbers of children were exclusively white, and a majority of white and Asian. So the equity problem came in. But in that way, once the child is targeted or marked and passes the test, they're placed in it during the third grade, and then they continue all the way to high school unless they opt out or there is another reason why they cannot continue. It's very difficult to get out of it once you get in, which is amazing because the
Mhm.
children have access to honor classes. In elementary school, she did discovery classes, which were a special class of children who were only all in highly capable. They did independent work. They did in they were self starters. They were able to skip ahead if they already knew the lesson. So it worked really well for her because she's a scientist at heart and she loves
Love
exploring
to
and
hear
learning.
that.
Yes, so she's the type of student who is a self starter who likes to set her own set her own pace when she's learning. It works for her.
That's really good. I'm really glad to hear that. I love to hear the science bit, right? I see the solar system there in the background, and I noticed that earlier, and I just love it. That's wonderful, really. So I've been reading a little bit of neurodiversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you are more of an expert in it than I am because I've just kind of briefly glanced at it. I do work in the, public education system in the United States, and we do have children that have IEPs and 504s, and I am so glad, that we do have these things legislated, right? Because many times people have been left out and basically been on the fringes of our society and not been treated as people worthy of being invested in, which has been very problematic. In terms of the progress that we've made, as a nation, what do you think? Are the services appropriate? As a parent, do you think that the services are appropriate?
A lot of the time, what is neurodiverse and what's neurotypical? When a person is neurodiverse, it means that they're not like most of the majority autistic kids, developmentally delayed kids, other children with unlike neurotypical kids who are what's considered, quote unquote normal, or who will be in general education. Those are neurotypical kids. Neurodiverse kids, like my son, who's autistic, generally get an IEP, which is an individualized education plan. And this way, they get an education that fits their necessary needs and addresses their disabilities and their challenges and their successes. So if a child is highly capable and also needs special accommodations, an IEP will address all of those things. And an IEP is generally really about accommodations of the child. In this way, the IDEA, which is a federal law, requires all children get a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, and that just means that the education fits the student individually. And the least restricted environment just means that they're not always in a resource room or exclusive class for just special education. Special education children, that they have access to general education so that they have peers, and also they're moving along with the rest of the students who are their age. And so my son has a half and half program where he spends some time in his special education class and he spends the rest of the time in the general ed class, but with an assistant. So he has an assistant or a paraeducator who goes with him to support him during general education. And all of these things are itemized in his IEP, which is a contract between I and the education system in our school district, his teachers, his administrators. It's difficult and complicated to make. It can take a couple of months. It's done annually to update the student's progress so that things he has finished are done and taken out of it, and then we add new things, or sometimes we repeat the same things or add other things. So it's an ongoing process for the rest of his education system, education life.
That's really wonderful. And I really like, how you've gone above and beyond, to make sure that you're informed. Based on your advocacy that you do, let's say with Somali families, how well are the families aware of, their rights?
It's a half and half situation. I will meet parents who are extremely aware of their rights and just want to be given support in implementing them. They're like, we know what we want, but maybe they have a language accessibility issue where they don't speak enough English and they're concerned about an interpreter messing it up for them. So in that case, it's when I recommend parents who have children with special education plans, if you're not feeling confident, which I myself, who come across as confident, have my own friends who I consider who know more than me, who have been there, who support me during the process. So I have friends who support me, who've been there, done that, who know more and who I learn from. And the same way, I'm also teaching others and helping support others. So take someone with you if you're not feeling confident. There's professional advocates who will support you. There's also nonprofits who will support you for free. But the biggest asset I find are other parents who are in the same situation as you. They know the most, they know the best, they have been there. And it's just something comforting to know that it's not just, a clinical support. This is a person who knows, who feels me. So most of the time, a lot of the Somali parents know, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The struggle is quite real. A lot of the time I am destigmatizing and normalizing them, advocating for themselves. A lot of the time we're starting from point zero. Having a child on the spectrum or having a child with special needs is okay. You are not cursed. It's not the worst thing. It is not the best thing. It is just the thing. He is your child, the same as your other children are. I find that when we separate and we're like, our special needs children, this and that, I don't treat my son any differently than I treat my daughters, in the sense that he's a child who has challenges and triumphs and who needs help in some ways. The same way we were talking about my firstborn daughter, and her challenges are different. His challenges are in another area. So all children need support. We just have to educate ourselves on what it is that they need. And for special education, it's a little bit more, and in some cases a lot more, but educate yourself, empower yourself, surround yourself with people who know more, people who are learning. Stop don't believe the stereotypes, get away from the superstitions. I believe in Quran's healing. I do that all the time for myself, for my family, for my son. But I also believe in medical intervention. I also believe in therapy. I do all of those things for him and all my children. So in that way, when educating Somali parents, sometimes we start, before even teaching them their rights, we start at destigmatizing and normalizing having children and taking away the shame and all that. And then we get to know your rights and advocacy.
I really appreciate that there's so many, layers to this. And I'm really glad that you touched on that, like, cultural aspect. Sometimes we're very uncomfortable with touching on that cultural aspect, right? I imagine, immigrant parents that are already having a hard time in a new country may not want to, look head on at another potential, like, obstacle, and may not want to confront, it as a, like, something that they need to confront head on, and that they really need to get educated on and get support on, which is already limited, right? The support that we receive when we are new immigrants. So I imagine, I'm so glad that, that you talk about these really, really important things, like destigmatizing and saying that it's not a curse. It's not a curse, So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because there is that idea and there is that stigma, and that stigma, before you can even get the help that you need, is something that you have to overcome personally.
Truly. And I'm not trying to trivialize, the stigma is quite overpowering and overwhelming. One of the first things when he was first diagnosed was quite a lot of, all the processes you go through. And what I realized now, at first, you have this idea of fixing your child. Even the medical professionals are shoving therapies, behavior modification therapies. In what area is it okay to behavior modify your child? they're not dogs. This is not an experiment. So my child is perfect and ideal the way he is. There's nothing about him that I would like to change. My biggest problem is the school systems. My biggest problem is the rest of the world that does not allow him to exist the way he is. If neurotypical people are the ones who need to understand that neurodiverse people just require the same rights and legalities as everybody else. They exist, they're different, and they need to also exist without being modified to suit a more neurotypical world. So my biggest goal in advocacy is to change the environment, not my son.
Yeah.
The environment needs to change. The school district needs to change. The world needs to change and accept that not everybody is neurotypical and navigates the world in the same ways. So how do we do that? Why am I here talking with you, sharing my life with you in this way? Because, representation matters. When you see cases talk about special education and, how it affects them, a lot of the time, Black and brown children and Somali children are left behind because their parents don't talk about it. When people of other cultures talk about themselves, they're not necessarily addressing the needs of our children and our community. So that's why it's important for us to speak for ourselves. My needs for my child are quite different. He's Somali, he's Black, he's Muslim, he's a boy. All of these intersectionalities affect his autism. So he exists within that circle of all of those things. So how do I make the world around him safe and better for him? And sometimes I'm educating the lady at the Costco, line. Sometimes I'm educating his teacher. And sometimes I'm educating people on Facebook Live. But either way, in order for my son to succeed and for my daughters to succeed, I think we need to talk about the issues we face and destigmatize the shame of struggling parenthood, because parenthood is hard.
Girl,
it's a lot.
Parenthood is hard. Yes. And talking about that is so important, right? Because there is also that stigma, just not in even Somali specific or any like ethnic specific, just in any society. Even mentioning the struggles of parenthood is frowned upon, and somehow it supposedly negates, your parenting or your love for your children. And it's like, no, these are just realities that we talk about. They exist. It doesn't take away from my parenting or the love that I have for my child. How about COVID and learning, COVID and education? Oh my goodness. So I'm a teacher, as everyone knows, because I talk about it a lot. And it's a big part of my life. And I love teaching. And it's, I would say after having my child, second best thing in my life, teaching. So glad that I'm a teacher and that I'm in education. And right now I'm teaching during COVID. And in the beginning of the year, we started with a virtual learning. So doing something like this, where I didn't get to see a lot of my students though. So I definitely appreciate seeing you. So it would be like this, it would just be a black box, a bunch of black boxes with the name, of course. And it was so unlike that first day of school where you have that energy in the hallways and you have all of these, kids excited to be back because they get to see their friends and I get to see them and I'm just really excited. And it was just like quiet. And it was not the same. And, sometimes something's not the same. It's not necessarily bad, but this felt bad, and then we tried to make the virtual learning work. And then we went hybrid, which meant like some came in sometime and the others were home. And then other 2 days, other students came in and we're just, seeing them. Oh my goodness. I just love seeing them. I'm so excited, even though we all have to wear a mask and I don't really know how they look like, except for when I click, on the Power School and I see their picture. And then, but I have them in class and I also have other students on the Zoom. So I'm doing a couple of things at the same time.
Wow.
And it's dizzying. It's so dizzying. But we managed to make it work. And it makes me think about all of the disparities, though, that COVID really has shown exist in our society. We like to put a Band-Aid on things and say they don't exist or out of sight is out of mind, but we really had to look at it this time and we couldn't look away.
We can't really look away. It's in our faces. And I'm so sympathetic to teachers and so happy to have amazing teachers like you and the ones who my children are dealing, who are my children's teachers. I I love teachers. With anything, these are the people besides my family who are educating our teachers. I believe in investing in our teachers, because how can they do their best if they're not being their best, and given the best supports? But unfortunately, that is not the case. Nobody was ready for virtual schooling. In our district, we're doing complete virtual. Nothing,
Mm,
nobody's going to school. I know some other districts are doing hybrid models, but even if we were doing hybrid models, I would have opted out, because just of the risk
mm,
of having that accessibility to that many people. These
mm,
are children, they're not careful. I have a mom who's in her 60s. I don't want to compromise her and compromise myself or my children by exposing them. But so for us, we have the resources and the ability to keep our children home optional. In this case, it's not, but even if it wasn't, we would. But you see the disparities of what's happening. I mean, we people live in small apartments with multiple children. Where do you put them? In separate areas so they can all learn. Who has the tables to do all of these things? And we've all heard of the scarcity of tables when school was starting, and how expensive it was
mm,
to form an educational area for your children. And we started noticing not everybody could afford it. Not everybody had even the time to do this. So, and this is when the advocacy piece comes up. As parents, we have to advocate for our children and ask the school districts to support us. In many cases, my school district has supported my son in the sense of getting equipment that works for him. He has a special chair.
mhm.
He That works for him. That is a sensory motivated chair. It rocks back and forth.
Yes.
It's quite expensive, and I did ask for the school to provide it, and they did. And I know other parents who asked for desks. Our school district provided computers and learning materials. So they're doing the bare minimum, but for us it works because we can take care of the rest. But for
Mm,
parents who can't, it's quite an ordeal. And
mhm,
especially for special need children, special education children. For example, every morning in our house, we get ready and I make sure everybody's, my husband and I make sure everybody's ready. He's getting ready for a full-time office job in his own office because he has a full-time job to do. And
right.
my daughter is a sixth grader, so she has her own full-time schooling to get ready for in her room. And
Mhm,
now I have my 8-year-old son and then my 2-year-old. And I have to be in my son's class because he does need the support of an adult during school. So every day, 9 to 11:30, I'm sitting with him on different varieties of Zooms and learning time. And at the same time, I have to support a 2-year-old and
right.
keep her entertained, educated. Whereas while I'm educating and then have to be ready at 11:30 to give both kids, all the kids lunch because now we're at break. So it's quite a lot for a family to undertake. And
Mhm,
if you were working, it seems almost I cannot fathom how people are doing it who are working from home and doing it.
mhm,
So the disparities are quite hard for us in the way we have realized how much hard work goes into schooling and how much we miss it. So right now we're just kind of wading through it and doing the best. Sometimes we are tired and we opt out of school and send an email. We're not going to come into Zoom today. We're going to do asynchronous learning by reading and doing the materials by ourselves because we
mhm,
just don't have the energy. And I find that parents are overwhelmed and
right.
exhausted, stressed, in variety of ways. So more than anything, I've been urging myself to be kind and patient with myself so I
Mhm,
can practice the same thing with my children, being kind and patient with them and realizing that they're children in a pandemic. They
uh-huh,
need a lot of help and support. And we work a lot on our social emotional health. How am I supporting my children during this unprecedented, this difficult, this quite traumatizing time for them? They're home, their friends are not here, they're learning from a computer all day. We go for walks and we go
that's
on,
so good.
we bake and we craft and we Zoom,
Mhm.
we
I'm taking
FaceTime the
notes.
rest of our family,
Baking,
baking,
crafting.
crafting,
I've learned
um,
a few things. I've learned to bake a few things so far. So
banana
you
bread seems to be the thing. I can't
oh,
stand it, but everybody's
so
baking it, so we've been
amazing.
learning.
You don't like
I
banana bread?
No, I love bananas. I do not like banana bread. Don't take away my Somali part. I love bananas, but
Okay.
I will not
My
eat
part was
bananas.
like this close to being
No,
snatched.
no, no. It's a soft banana for me,
Yeah. Oh, honey,
No.
excuse me for one moment. One moment. It's just you.
It's me.
I'm sorry.
I'm so
Pardon
nervous.
me. Sorry, everybody. Okay. We were talking about banana bread, but more importantly, we were talking about COVID and learning. It's been a struggle on this end as well as from the parent side. So I'm a single parent, and during the virtual learning, my son had to be at home by himself. 13-year-old was like, it's doable. You're safe, right? Nothing's gonna happen, right? So, and I work very close to my job. But the anxiety was really high. The anxiety of, is he going to be able to self-manage? Does he understand what is going on? Most of the kids were not having their camera on, like my student. So, he also opted out and didn't want to be the odd one out, even though I insisted. I mean, if I'm not there, then a lot of times it was not happening. And I just had to make peace with certain things, right? I had to make peace with certain things. I had to do a lot of reteaching. After work, I'm exhausted because Zooming for the whole day is very exhausting. We never thought that it would be this exhausting, right? To be behind a camera and to be, on the entire time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I used to think teaching was exhausting. Teaching during pandemic, 100 times worse, So it's just very exhausting. And then Oh, excuse me, please. I do not know what happened there. I opted in for hybrid because I wanted, that outside time, because I was having really hard time with him being alone and being an only child, and that mental and emotional health. I thought, being around other people again might be better. But then now we probably will be going back to virtual because the COVID numbers are increasing in our area, and I may still have to work inside the building, and I'm just really anxious and stressed out about that, So from a teacher perspective, parent perspective, so I can imagine, other parents as well. Thankfully, we have the space. I am able to do the reteaching after work. So there's a lot of things, that we also have that I imagine, my students may not have, and that I imagine other parents may not have access to. And then how are we, when this maybe somewhat resolves itself, how are we going to go back to, education like we knew before? Is that even a possibility? Can we really go back to the way it used to be before? Is that even going to be practical or realistic or even the right thing to do? So
I don't think so at all. I think we've learned, and we should never go back to the way we were. We're beyond it. I am not an advocate of backwards, like let's go back. The way we were before was complacent and not the best. And now we know more. And an example, right now we're doing a unit on Native, on early American history in my son's class, and I have almost as much access as the teacher. And now I'm looking at the curriculum that my children are being taught from a view that I have never had before, because I am there with him completely. And I am watching this whitewashed history that is being taught about indigenous folks. And I had to push back on the unit you were learning. I'm like, this is not going to work for us. This is not the right history. I'm looking at it and I'm like, they have completely rewritten the history. The teacher is apologetic. She doesn't mean to. She has a curriculum to teach.
Right,
but
right.
We have to stand up and say, this is not the right thing. And luckily, we were able to share resources. And there was pushback from some parents who didn't agree and thought maybe teaching children the real history is inappropriate. And I was like, I'm like, at teach, it was a white dad who was like, they're just third graders. What would they understand? And I'm looking at them, I'm like, well, why teach them at all?
Why teach them at all, right?
Teach them at
why
all.
Bother at all then if they don't understand anything?
Why bother with this reductionist history that's written from a point of view with so much lies? So I'm like, no, we're not going to do this here. I personally will not let my son learn this material. It is not the way. We will not learn stereotypes and lies. And we had to push back. And this has given me an insight to the curriculum and what I have to unteach my children. And it doesn't do me any favors. This is a great opportunity for any parents who are having access to the curriculum, who are seeing what their children are learning, to have more of a voice and speak up and say,
Mm,
in fact, this is not what I want, and this is not how I see it, but do it in a way that's productive.
mm.
Don't go there defensive and anti. Go there with solutions.
Yeah.
So teach or ask to be taught properly and ask the relevant questions, and more than anything, and that's what I'm learning. I have been learning to be more even more outspoken, and if that's even possible, but more than anything, doing the best I can for my children and changing. We always take it for granted that we're keeping our children safe, but we have to also make sure what they're learning is also the right things. If
Mm,
your curriculum isn't the best, if the teacher isn't doing what she's supposed to do, I'm like, how can I support you as a parent to do your job? Because, like you said, you're also a mom and you also have children. You're also a teacher. So how can I support you so that we can both be the best for our children?
mhm.
That is what it's. I consider my children's education a triangle system. Me, the child, and the school, and the teachers in
Right.
the school triangle. And I always include my children in their education as far as they can participate. They're part of their conferences. All my children,
Mhm.
both my daughter and my son, have always attended the parent teacher conference because I'm talking about them. Why would I not include them so that they can
In the
self advocate
conversation,
while
right.
they're there? And also chime in, is what the teacher saying the truth, or because it's a teacher's perspective, what is the
Right.
student's perspective? How do they feel when this was happening and the teacher thinks so? I love it. It's a great way to open dialogue and support the
Mhm.
students and make them feel a part of their education.
I really like that. That is amazing. That is so amazing. You're really right. Like you're talking about them, they're being discussed, their education is being discussed. Why are they not included in it? That is just so powerful. And the curriculum is definitely important. I'm really glad, more parents are speaking out about that and speaking up for themselves. A lot of marginalized communities are basically written out of the history or portrayed in a certain way that isn't entirely accurate. Um,
Hmm.
and there were times where parents were not able to challenge that. I'm really hoping that we get to a point where we can challenge that as parents. As a parent, I remember my second grader when he was learning about Thanksgiving and the pilgrims and the Native Americans feasting together, and I was like, listen, hold up. And I said, no, that's not how it went down,
Yeah.
and that's not the correct history. And I told him as a second grader, and I found that it was important that he knew the truth. And, as a second grader, he went back to school and told all his friends, of course, and teacher found out and he was like, who told you that? My mom told me that. And I said, yes, if she tells
Yes,
you,
we do.
or if you get in trouble because of that, then, I will be there at the school. But there's power in doing that, right? There's power that, when you know better and when you're assertive and when you can speak up for yourself, that you can go and challenge that, right? And yes, the powers that be are still the powers that be, and they may be greater in number because the culture and tradition of this country has been that way, right? But I
Hmm.
think a lot of times, I hate this word too, marginalized, but I feel like that's the lack of a better term right now, right? Voiceless on purpose, right?
Hmm.
Feel afraid, especially if we are immigrants and we're new to this country. We feel that we are not able to speak up for ourselves and we are not entitled to anything more than what we're getting. And that's not true.
That is not true. But one side effect of being an advocate or powerful or outspoken is that the systems that be take you seriously. They treat you
Mm,
differently. You understand? When we did our most recent IEP for my son, which I thought was the best IEP. Took me a long time to formulate it. I did so much, canceled so many meetings because they did try to derail me. And it was complicated, but I got it done. I got everything that I wanted, which took months, by the way, and got it done. Every bit. I cannot believe to you how awkward and embarrassing it was for me to get all of these congratulations. It's as if they have never, and they have seen, you know, other people from other races, I guess, speak up. But I'm not sure if they have seen a Somali woman, a woman in hijab, a woman who doesn't, whose English isn't her first or even second language. Advocate for herself this way, not be afraid, not be powerless, know all her rights, know that I can get more help, and let them know to their face. At some point, they called the assistant director of special education of our whole district to come attend our meeting, just so that they could make sure that I didn't get what I wanted. And to me, it was an oxymoron. In what way is this a school that educates children that does not allow them to get the best education possible? It was almost that they were placing obstacles, it seemed, and it was dismissive, it was disrespectful, it was, they treated me like a powerless and a voiceless person. Unfortunately, I had to teach them differently and let them know that's just not the way. What you think you see is not what you're gonna get. And I can tell you, the atmosphere in the school for me has changed, because these are people in the same school. They talk to each other. They treat you with respect. They include you with your child's education. They know you're watching them and holding them accountable, so they hold themselves more accountable for you. And it has been great. I will never go back to being voiceless. And what you were just talking about, new immigrants, not even new immigrants, we have to take and think about the traumas and the places we come from, places with authoritarian governments where people have less voice, and people treat teachers in a different way. They hold them to a different standard. Instead of a collaborator or a person in the same team as you hold them as somebody above you and someone who you defer to in your children's education. Someone who has, I don't defer to anybody but God when it comes to my children. You understand? These are my children. I am their guardian. I'm here to take care of them. I don't defer to the school system because I have options. And I have a voice. So when they realize that, there's always a pushback and there's always accountability, and I'm going to let them know, of course, I'm always kind and always, extremely polite, unless that situation requires me to be something else, then that's what you're going to get. But more than anything, it's knowing that you are an equal partner in your children's education. The minute you start holding yourself in that power, in that place, and regardless of language accessibility, resource accessibility, this is about putting yourself there and making sure that you've put these values. I don't have the resources maybe, but the school can help you get them, or other people can. A voice is something you have. It's not dependent on even language. Interpreters and translators can help you get your voice more heard. Just surround yourself with people who support you and know more. And I want Somali parents and people who speak other languages or who are immigrants to know that they're not voiceless. They're not marginalized. In many ways they are, but they can do more within that small corner they have put us in. We have to fight back and advocate. And, our children are depending on us. We've been here for almost close to 30 years now, most of us, some of us. And we can't just be in the same place as when we came in, when our parents brought us and they didn't know what they were doing. I want to do more for my children than my mom wanted to do but couldn't, that she didn't know how. I know more, I know better, I will. And I'm not going to, allow my children to get a deficit education because I didn't do the best.
I mean, mic drop, okay?
Thank you.
Yes, and advocating for your children. I mean, what's better is that, right? What is better than that, right? They're the people looking up to you, relying on you, and there's nothing more important, and you know what they deserve, and you are speaking for them. And I think that's so important. I hope, as a teacher too, I wish all parents did that. I love parents that come for parent-teacher conferences. I love speaking with them. That tells me that they take an active interest in their child's education and in their child as a person. And then I do know that some people, because of work or because of other reasons, are not able to attend, but then they'll email me, and I appreciate that too. I love communicating with parents, which is actually a new thing for me now, because in my early years, I was terrified of speaking to parents. I was so terrified. I thought they would just, if I would call them and say so and so did this, minutes and, got in trouble in class, that they would like shout at me or something. And in time, I just, started doing more and more and more. And now I'm very comfortable, like, so, and I don't know, you learn obviously by doing, right? The more time I'm in this profession, the more second nature things become. So now I see that partnership, and I really like the triangle version that you said much better, because I do believe, especially in any age, but I feel like especially the older that they get, the more that they need to self-advocate. I always tell the students, I'm going to email you first before I call home, or I'm going to have a chat with you first, because you're coming up, you're getting older, you need to be more responsible and be accountable to yourself, so. But it takes time, right? It takes time to learn those skills.
It does. And what I love about talking with you, and why I love it, is because, like you said, being a teacher in some cases can be so mysterious to parents. This person has access to our children when we don't, and they're teaching them things sometimes we don't know, or we've not been in the American system, although I have been. So it's like, for parents who came here as adults who didn't go to American schools, this is all a mystery to them. But the fact that, Ifrah, you're out here talking, you have put a human face to teachers, which I love. The fact that you're a Somali teacher, a Somali science teacher, all of these things to me are amazing. There's a Somali teacher of the year in Minnesota, I think. We're doing it for ourselves. We're getting in the system and infiltrating. I'm just doing my part as a parent, and making sure that, while our students, there's so many Somali students in school districts, but not enough Black teachers. Forget about Somali teachers, not enough people who understand them and who advocate for them. They hardly see adults who look like them. Most of the time, it's just themselves. And I feel that sometimes they feel like they're in a whirlwind of foreignness. They're American, but American adults don't consider them American. They consider themselves American, but the system doesn't consider them American. And I think that's where the parents have to come in. I have recently been noticing that my daughter, and I was crying to you the other day, like, she doesn't need me. She self-advocates for herself. Sometimes she will ask for my advice. She's like, I wanted to talk to teacher because blah, 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 and so and so. How do you think I should do it? And we talk through it and brainstorm. And she sends her own emails and advocates for herself, and then tells me, am I proud? So proud, so happy.
Yes.
Sad, but I have taught her, and she has learned because I have done these things, and I learn from her every day. It's a process of learning and also unlearning some toxic behaviors and traditions, and things. As a Somali woman, we have so much to unlearn and unpack. My biggest thing right now during this COVID is, like I was saying, kindness and forgiveness of myself, because I so much on myself, being a first oldest daughter in a family, a wife, a mother, and an advocate, a person who's true, a writer in the making. These things, it's just not enough space. Thank you. There isn't just enough space for me to be all the things I want to be. And sometimes I feel like as moms, we don't prioritize ourselves, or as women, we put so much of ourselves in our lives, and now the kids are here the whole time. We have less time to ourselves than before. And, so for families, I would say, for single families, like you do, work your networks if you can. And for families who are two parents in a home, support each other, because it cannot be a one person's job, especially a mom's job. It has a group effort from both partners, and rely on your other family or your friends. Support each other, make each other part of
saying that. It's such a struggle. It's such a struggle.
Who are also doing the same thing. Yes, it's a lot. It's a lot.
To ask for help. It's such a struggle, isn't it?
It's my least favorite thing and my worst habit. I am always helping others, and this is not a brag. It's just the way I show love. And recently I was talking to someone, and they were like, being ultra and super independent is a traumatic response to being a firstborn daughter, to not being able to accept help because you just rather do it fast in case other people fail you. And something I'm unteaching myself. Ask for help from your children, from your husband. Let them know when you're struggling, and especially your children. Please let them know when you're having a hard time. Let them know that you're struggling and you're learning with them. They will love you more and understand you more. And when you fail, you are not falling very far because you're not on a pedestal. You're just their mom. You're a person who hurts and who loves and who's just there to support them, but also is a person who needs support. And it takes away
Human
from that,
being,
it takes away from the mysticism of momminess, like mommy's all
yeah.
powerful. I am not all powerful, nor do I want to be. I don't want to be one of those authoritative moms. I want to be a compassionate and a
Mm,
kind, intentional, gentle mom, which is the opposite of what we've been taught. You
right.
spoil children. I don't believe that's even possible. I love my children and support them, and I don't believe in corporal punishment,
Me neither.
or that type of stuff. It does
No,
nothing.
no whoopings.
Never. I don't believe in touching. My thing is, if I don't allow other people, if I'm not okay with being hit, why would I hit another much smaller person who's depending on me? It almost doesn't make sense when you think about it.
It's
Why would
abuse,
you
right?
hit
It's very
your
abusive.
children who love you and then hug them? To me, it doesn't make sense. So I'm like, I don't allow people to hit me, so I don't allow my children to be hit by me or anybody else.
That's really good, like like a measure, like just a good compass of
Hmm.
I wouldn't want this to be done to me, so I don't do it to other people, point blank. And I think that's really good about unlearning things. Oh my goodness, and asking for help. It's such a struggle for me too. And I caved not too long ago, and I went and asked for help, and it was like just given to me, and I was like, oh,
You did it.
I also trapped in that place too for a long time where I'm like, I just do it myself. I can't rely on people. I just do it myself. And I
Strong
think,
Black
like I said,
woman.
it's toxic and it is a trauma response.
Mm-hmm. It's the myth of the strong Black woman. I feel like
Ah,
the strong Black woman gets heart attacks and gets diabetes. That's not what I want for myself.
mm,
um, the strong Black woman ends up being alone because she's doing almost all the work and being alone and resentful because nobody is helping her.
mm,
All of these things. And this is what society has put on us. They have put us in this place where we have to work so hard for everything, for everything. So I'm destigmatizing this for myself, but more than anything for my daughters. How can I teach them? I teach my daughters to take alone time, to opt out of things from relatives, to say, I don't want to see that. I don't want to do that. It's not for me. I want them to be able to say those things. I want her from the beginning. It's annoying in some cases for me because I am like, let's get it done. But I give them options so that they give them little choices, big choices. They make almost all the choices unless it's something that they cannot and they're not there
mm,
yet. But they
mm,
make choices so that later they're more prepared to make more choices. Unlike when I went to college, I had no idea what to do because I've never learned how to adult. So while I'm here with them and loving them and empowering them, I'm also helping them learn how to be more fully actualized human beings who know they can rely on themselves. She can trust her choices regardless of society's bombardment of anti-feminist patriarchal things happening daily, anti-blackness. She is confident in herself and self-assured so that she can navigate these spaces for herself. And also because she has a lot more responsibilities than most girls. As she becomes an adult, she will have a brother who will need her support.
right.
That is something we prepare her for and for ourselves.
Hmm.
That our son might need help the rest of his life. And his sisters, luckily he has one older sister and one younger sister, and he couldn't be more blessed, and they couldn't be more blessed because we make it possible for them. He knows them, they know him, they know his challenges and his triumphs, but they also know that they also matter to me and they also come first, because sometimes families with children with special needs or disabilities requires so much and sometimes takes away. Parents can lose focus of all of their children because some children have very serious, urgent, or immediate needs. So we try our best and make sure all of our children are being met. And we are not a very big family. We have only 3 children. So
Yeah.
it works for us. And my family, my sisters, my mom, my brothers, everybody has been so supportive in our journey of parenthood. for me, literally, it's a whole village. My girlfriends, oh my God, I couldn't talk enough about them. I have some of the best girlfriends. We have children the same age. And for me, they cannot be valued more because these are the people who you raise your children with.
Right. And I think that is so important that you talk about the village, right? What children need. Definitely parents that are there, but also an entire village of people that love and support them, because you can't have enough love. You know, you can never have too much of it, right? You need love, and children especially need to see those people that love them and care for them. And parents need that support. And I think as my child is growing, I've always known I needed support, but because it wasn't there, Faduma, I just learned to live without that support. But I realized that children shouldn't need to learn to live without that support.
Yeah.
So when you spoke about like unlearning things and asking for help, and you know, now speaking about the village, I've really had to just unlearn so much. I learned to live without people, and I'm like, do I want the same for my child? I'm like, no, my child who loves people, who's so social, who loves interacting with other people, no, I don't want him to live without people. And it just forced me to like reach out to people, which wasn't my comfort. I don't like that, but I had to, you know.
You have
and
to.
and having a village and just actually asking for help and not isolating myself and not being like, I'll just do it myself, I can't count on people. That's very toxic.
Very. And it's almost a default setting for ourselves, isn't it?
Mm.
You know, as I talk about these things, some of these things I am also, actually, I'm always learning. I think when we stop learning is when we become stagnant. For me, I'm learning these things and I'm talking them and putting them into the universe as, you know, wish fulfillment. I want to be the best and the most supportive for myself, as a result to my family. And, you know, as I unlearn and learn and all these things, you know, every day is not a great day. Yesterday, I went for a ride and had an acupuncture visit because I have been so tense and anxious and exhausted. And while I was driving, windows open, blaring music, just feeling free and alone. Not to feel like, you know, and these feelings cannot be denied. Sometimes I need alone time. And, you know, I have a partner who's supportive and a family who's supportive. So it's difficult for me. The guilt is still there, trying to shame myself. Are you leaving your, you know, kids? Are you know, you're doing too much for yourself? But no, you also deserve time, and I have to be able to acknowledge that for myself and enjoy the moments that. While I was at my appointment, I didn't call back the children and check on them because I have to trust my partner to take care of their father and my husband to take care of them. You know, I don't want to micromanage and take away from my experience of enjoying and relaxing, and also his spirit, his enjoyment of being with his children without being micromanaged. So that is something I have to unlearn. That super strong, everything is my business Black woman that I am. I have to scale back and be like, you know what? He's capable. He's great. He can do it. I have now to do this for myself, and this is my time. Went to visit my mom, had lunch with my brothers, came back. It was great.
That's so amazing. And you deserve that time. And you, like you said, absolutely. Don't take away from your experience. Don't take away from their experience. And, you know, they'll be okay.
They were.
Need to just want to micromanage everything. I also like practice that, you know, in class. Like I've also just kind of because I think COVID forced me, just let go of a lot of control. But it's a blessing in disguise almost. I hate to say that because this is a terrible virus, but the situation that it's put me in where I had to let go of all that control has been good for my learning. I'm like, they will be okay. I am doing the best that I can. They are doing the best that they can. It's gonna be okay. We'll be okay. You know,
we will be okay. We will be okay.
Check off my list, everything. It would just drive me nuts. I'm like, oh my goodness, this didn't get done. Like my whole agenda is out the window. Now I'm like, we're safe. We're okay. Tomorrow is another day. It's fine.
Every day, there's nothing wrong with practicing it and writing it down and saying it to yourself in the mirror and saying it to your child. How can we make today better? How was today? Every day it's not possible every day, but every day during some point of the day, I try to have a quiet touch moment with just one of my kids, alone, just between us. It can sometimes be a hug while they're in the bathroom, or help them moisturize themselves, or do my daughter's hair, or read with my son, or as I'm reading and doing something, one of my children will cuddle with me and I will give them a foot massage, or they will cuddle and hold me, or try to comb my hair. Either or, I try to have that time where we touch base with each other and check on each other and be like, hey, what's going on? How was your day? What are you up to?
So
How are you
important.
feeling? I'm really not feeling good today. I'm tired, or I don't know, my back is hurting, or my
Mhm.
head is hurting. And they'll offer, can I get you some water, mommy? Do you need a
Oh,
hug, mommy? And that's all I need. And they need the same thing. Like, do you need some water, babe? And touch base. Sometimes it's 30 seconds, sometimes it's 40 minutes. Some days we're exhausted and we all pile each other on the bed and they watch they're on an iPad, I'm on a Kindle, someone is reading. you know, we don't restrict them in the sense that we're not taking away some of the things, but I am more open and relaxed and giving them space to process this pandemic and being at
mhm.
home this much. Living here in Washington, it's quite cold. I know Ohio is
Yeah.
probably worse, but it's
It's
raining and gray
worse.
at 4. So it's not always possible to go outside, which is what we love and do here.
Mhm.
Sometimes we go on rides, curbside pickup from Barnes and Noble or Target, or ice cream, or take out for the day because we don't want to cook and we just want to sit in
Love
blankets
it.
and watch
Yes.
something. So being kind and also letting go of rigid mindset has been helpful to me, which is not easy for me. I struggle with it quite a lot.
I'm so glad to have talked to you, Faduma. There's like
Thank you.
so many ideas that you've given me in terms of self-care, in terms of, unlearning, advocating for our children, advocating for our community. I'm really glad, that you're here today with us. Thank you so much for dropping all
Thank
this
you.
knowledge and this life experience and wisdom.
Oh
You need
no.
to write that book. Yes, I'm going to have to harass you now daily.
No. Well, I'm a procrastinator, so I have many notes, and one day I will sit down and do it. But right now, well, we're just trying to process COVID and have try to be as healthy mentally and physically as we can, and love each
Mhm.
other, and support our family and our
Love each
community at
other.
large. I miss being with people. Zoom
Right.
isn't enough. Sometimes you want to see other adults who are not your husband.
And feel their energy. I'm
Yes.
like, we took that for granted, didn't we? I feel like
Hmm.
I did because I prefer to stay home. I'd be like, oh, there's some event going. I'm like, people think I'm social because, but no. Give me my coffee, my books, and my bed any day of the week, and that's where
Yes.
I'm at. But now I'm like, I regret it. All those days that I was invited out, I wish I could have gone. I really miss people, and I miss those haflada where I would dress
Hmm.
up and put my nice,
Hmm.
bit on, and I miss that all that
No,
energy, and
thank you for giving me the opportunity to put some makeup on and feel better about myself and have something to do. But please don't, diminish what you do. It's so important. I look forward to your lives and your posts. They're so empowering to me as a woman in many ways. I know a lot of the time we talk about people when they die, but I want to give you your roses now and
thank
say thank
you.
you for being an outspoken Somali woman who stands on her ground and always says what is honest. Sometimes we don't always agree with each other, but more than anything, I love the multi-dimensional, complex Somali women that are coming out in social media who are so different from each other, but all sisters, and so many ways Arawalos and different and Naganol, you know,
And
and
we are
all
here
of those
to
things.
support each other, and you
Hmm.
too, all of the work that you're doing. I want to give you your flowers too on, speaking up and speaking out and not mincing your words. That's so
Hmm.
important. Being assertive as a woman, although sometimes we get called names for it, actually not sometimes, all the
All
time,
the time, all the time, and
and it's
isolated and
right.
ostracized for being strong and outspoken. But I can say that, like you do, at the end of the day, I have to look myself in the mirror and I have to respect myself. You know,
Absolutely.
I have to stand up before my Allah and say, I did the best as I did, Ya Allah. I
Yes.
did all that the privileges you gave me, I did the most with it. And I did not diminish myself to fulfill ideas of other people of what they think a Somali woman who's married, who has children is like. I am a mom, I am a wife, I am a woman, but those are not my most defining things. And I'm Muslim, and your ideas of me are your business. That's not my life.
Right, that's none of my business. Like, you can think whatever you want, and I think making peace with that is so important. I'm a recovering nice girl, you know, I'm a recovering like people pleaser. And I would hate for anybody to think badly of me or feel hurt by my actions or words. And I'd feel so responsible for people's feelings. And I realize people are responsible for their own feelings. Like, I'm responsible for my feelings, and no, I shouldn't hurt people with my words or actions, but I'm not asserting my boundaries isn't like hurting people's feelings. And it's like all that unlearning, you know. I think that's it's a lifelong journey, but it's like,
yes.
I'm so glad that I'm here, and I don't really care what people think, because I know that I don't go out of my way to hurt anybody in any way. And the way that I live my life and what's good for me is good for me. And it's just, I'm unapologetic about that. You know, it is what it is.
I have never been a nice girl, to tell you the truth. I am generally quieter, but I am come from a not nice mom who's amazing and has been a strong woman, and that has taught me to stand up for myself. She's come through with 9 children, coming to the United States here by herself, getting them through universities, all of them, making sure all of them, and living here, working as a hotel maid, as working, educating herself during the process, and having children all the way from 13 to 1 here, and coming here and navigating processes. We've always been a team. As I said, I never leave without mentioning Bulale Inc., which is what we are. We always work like a company and support each other. So for me, I have always had that privilege of knowing my family is 100% behind me. And so I have never felt that people pleasing, because I have had that. But more than anything, I want to give that to my daughters who are a very small family, but my extended family is their own. And if you ever talk to my friends, my family is always adopting people, and my friends become my sisters, because if you're my friend, then that means you have access to my family, and we'll support you and we will love you. But I only have just very few friends, because I don't have the energy or the desire to, because you want to bring your friends in to support you. So I'm not, like you were saying, I'm an introverted extrovert, you know. I am introverted. I do well in social settings, but most of the time I prefer that one-on-one. And I'm so glad we're doing this one-on-one, because it's so good. So good.
Right. I love people, but I get, you know, when I'm reading about like neurodiversity is so interesting, because I thought to myself too, I was like, I love people, but I get overstimulated. I get overstimulated by a lot of things, and I need to go and recharge. And you learn about yourself, you know, and I was like, wow, you know, I feel like there's so many of us that we don't know who we are. So things happen because we're overstimulated, we're in situations that we don't know how to respond, because things are a havoc within us. You know what I mean?
Opt out. Always opt out when you're feeling that way. Take the time to regroup. I find we are never taught to opt out. It's either yes or a no situation. Sometimes it's a maybe or a not right now. Let me think about it. I practice this quite a. Let me think about it, or let me get back to you. I love those. I'm just like, you know, I want to give myself a time to think about it and not be pressured to please or to perform. I'm like, let me get back to you. That's really the best I can do right now, you know, or energy. Sometimes I don't have the energy, so I don't want to expand it. And like you said, we become overstimulated, and then we do things we're not happy or proud of, you know. And I'm like, like I said, kindness is not my go-to thing. I'm more quiet, and for me, I work at it. I'm intentionally kind. I'm intentionally kind, which for me is more important than being quasi-kind. You know, I'm kind because I mean to be, and it's important, you know.
And there's still that self-love and those boundaries, right? Because being kind isn't just being kind to other people, it's being kind to yourself. And it's a balance, right? Where are you? Like, are you here? I'm kind to myself and to other people, you know, within reason. or I'm totally selfish, forget other people, or I'm just going to do everything for other people and nothing for myself, right? There's balance. And I'm learning so much, Faduma, personally. Everybody here together, I'm learning so much about like just the paradox of life, to balance and just the paradox of life. And I think that paradox of life, that it's good and bad, and some days are good, some days are bad, is probably the best lesson in my entire life. Like, the best lesson. This is just a moment in life. This isn't everything. You know, some people are good and sometimes people can do bad things. It's okay. It's not the end of the world.
No.
You know, the
apologize and forgive yourself.
Right.
You make that, apologize. Yeah. And forgive yourself.
Forgive yourself.
And learn from the process. Learn.
Like, you're not holding yourself. Like, forgive other people. Like, if they've done more good than bad in your life, then just say, hey, you know, I'm gonna let go of that bad thing, because obviously you're a human being. You're gonna make mistakes. Hey, I'm a human being, and I'm insert bad word many times, right? So it's
bleep, bleep. But yes,
bleep, you know. So the paradox of life. It's gonna be the title of my memoir.
No, we did, but like parenthood is not possible if you are not a self-fulfilled person. A lot of the time we hear, you know, you can't ask a partner to make you happy. Parenthood is the same thing. You cannot expect parenthood or children to fulfill you. You have to be a fulfilled person yourself, so you can be a better parent, you know, and so you can get away from those toxic and traumatic traditions that come from being a Somali parent, and some of those ideas that do not necessarily come into my parenting, you know, lifestyle. I have to stand in that, where people make fun of you, be like, oh, this shit, please. I mean, you know, like, no, that is, you know, you have to battle all that without getting
like, you know. Like,
yes, they tell you what to do.
They have a say too, you know. It's like this. We were raised in that authoritarian situation, you know, and it's like you said, back home and the cultures that we're from, well, like, there is that sense of authoritarian. So there is like that power struggle, you know. There doesn't need to be a power struggle. Like, you're there to guide your children, and they will push their limits. Okay, wait till, you know, let me tell you another time.
They're learning.
As they're learning, they will push your buttons and stuff like that. But it's like a constant negotiation, and it's not concessions, and it's not a lose-win or situation, you know. So there isn't that need for that dictatorship. And like you said, they're in training. You know, how can they become adults if they're not able to exercise a decision making?
How do we ask them to be outspoken at school, and then they come home to me and they're like, oh, someone bullied me or someone yelled at me, and you're like, why? And then you have to think back, did you give them the tools to self-advocate, or are you the type of parent who shoots down when they talk back to you? Don't talk back to me, don't look at me, don't talk, you know, don't do this. And then you raise a timid child, or you know, a child who's afraid to speak up because the consequences are harsh. Respect me, and you know, all these things you have to do. It's the word I hate least in the whole English language. I'm not sure what the Somali version is. Obey. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in obedience, or even blind obedience, which is what Somali parents sometimes require from their children. I believe in autonomy. You know, and keeping my children, giving them boundaries between themselves, for me, between us, between them and the world, between them and their friends. We treat each situation as a singular moment, and we learn from it. If you're having friends with your friends, how could you do better? Well, is this even a person who's your friend?
Right.
You know, all of those things. So I try as I'm learning to be more autonomous as a Somali woman, because systems are set up to keep us, you know, bound, and, you know, in some cases I feel enslaved to the patriarchy that's our culture. We have to unpack and just opt out, you know, and be like, how can I be the best Somali and Muslim? I'm always an advocate of leaving the bad things and taking the good things. All Somali culture is not for me, nor is it good for women. I take all the good things I love about Somali culture, celebrate them, elevate them, and get rid of anything that I feel is toxic or harmful to me or my family. You know, so the idea, there's no need to protect the culture. You know, protect the people. I don't care about the culture. I care about the people. You know,
absolutely. People always. People over everything.
over traditions, over shame, over over, upholding images. What is an image if you're miserable,
Girl, I feel like Sheka and Willie get
Yeah, but
they
I
said,
say,
but we've been at
call
it
me
now for an
back.
hour and 15 minutes,
No,
about
no,
15
we will
minutes.
talk later. But I'm so
We will
excited.
chit chat some more, wallahi. And this conversation about Somali womanhood, about Somali motherhood. Oh my goodness, there's just so many gems being dropped here. Like, I'm taking notes. I'm gonna rewatch the video later on, and I'll take my notes and I'll follow up with you, Faduma, because this is an ongoing conversation.
You can't get rid of me. You're my friend now.
Don't ever want to get rid of you. And I expect to be adopted by Bulale Inc. I'm already sending the paperwork.
I think someone has a question here somewhere. I can see it.
Right.
Did you put it there?
Yes.
Okay. What advice would you give parents who have special need children and how they can be content with Allah's plan? Thank you, Zamzam Elmi. I love your content and your group, and I'm always using your services as a teacher and an educator. So thank you, Zamzam. But more than anything, of course, all our children are Allah's plan, and our duty is to serve Him and support and empower our children. When you have an autistic child or a child with any other disability or delayed, Down syndrome, any sort of developmental, neurological, any sort of difference or neurodiversity, I say immediately love your child. Whatever emotions you have as an adult, that's your business. I always say deal with your feelings. As an adult, don't emote towards your child. Deal with them. If you need therapy, if you need a sheikh, if you need to talk to your girlfriends, do whatever it is to make you accept and understand that your child is perfection, amazing, and children who are typical also need support. So when you start separating neurodiverse children from neurotypical children, that's when the problem becomes a situation. When you separate, oh, woe is me, my child has extra needs. I understand, believe me, about extra needs. But when you start feeling that those extra needs are a burden, now is when you need to seek support. I say thank you to Allah for giving me all of my children. I wouldn't trade him for anything. If you had met him, he would change your life. And not because he's autistic, it's because he's Jibril and he's amazing as a person, And I accept him for his hugs and for when he needs alone time, when he's overstimulated, when I learn to be a better parent to him, to support him, the same way as I accept my daughter when she goes through and my baby. So for me, neurotypical, neurodiverse, these are your children. Accept them and support them and meet their needs as best as you can. And if you can't, ask for help and learn and educate yourself about your child. Become an expert on your child's needs. All of your children, neurodiverse, neurotypical, become an expert on what their needs are. My daughter's needs are different from my son's needs and a baby's needs. I treat them as individuals always. An individual with autism, an individual who's a girl, an individual who's a baby. So I hope that answers your question.
They are, and I think such a thorough answer, right? Such a thorough first love your children. That's the most important thing.
Accept your children.
And
accept your children. Yes,
for who they are.
They will feel it if you don't accept them. I feel children as some of the most understanding people. We take them for granted and don't realize. I never presume my children don't understand anything. That they understand some things they're not. They don't know, but they do understand what it is, and you have to teach them things they have never experienced, like adult situations. But they can feel your lack of acceptance and you feeling them and treating them like a burden. I swear, and it's quite tragic.
Oh, absolutely. Faduma Bai, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I am definitely sending my paperwork for Bulale Inc. to be adopted.
Anybody can reach me on my Facebook. Please send me any questions on my Facebook Messenger. If you have any questions, if you write me extensive Somali things, I might not understand how to read them, but my husband knows how to read them. I was born in Abu Dhabi, and Somali is not my first language, but I'm learning. But
okay.
Please feel free to communicate in whatever language you want in my messenger. I will reply in any as fast as I can most of the time.
Thank you so much for doing that. And Simsim says thank you. And we all say thank you. And we will be sending all of our questions to you. Now that you've, allowed us to and given us a permission ahead of time, typing away, and we'll be sending our questions. Really appreciate all of the support and advocacy that you do, Abayo. All of the information and knowledge, the gems that you dropped today. And so many different, topics. I really appreciate that. This is definitely going to be an ongoing conversation, and we'll probably have to do part 2 or part 3 because, it just, one, and 2, this is just such an important conversation. There's so many different elements to it that each one deserves its own time, more than its time. And hopefully, we'll see some of your writing in the future. There's so much experience and wisdom and knowledge that you have to share. So I look forward to learning more from you. Thank you so much for your time.
And I say thank you for creating feminine spaces, Somali women spaces that we can thrive in, because a lot of these spaces are masculine. So one-on-one with a woman, to me, always feels special. And this is why I think we connect, because we are sisters.
Absolutely. Always, always.
Thank you, Ma'anto.
Thank you. And everybody else, thank you so much. You know what I say? You've given us, your most precious asset, your time. You're never going to be able to get your time back. So anybody who gives you their time gives you a gift, that's just immeasurable. So I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you being with us and listening. Thank you very much, Walala. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Sunday. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.